Hello class, today we are going to be going over some decorative twists. Now we've already, in person, a few weeks ago, it was probably about a month ago actually, I showed you all how to make this braided rope twist, which is probably the most basic decorative twist aside from just leaving it square, not doing anything to it, and twisting it. This only has one step before the twisting really. We'll also be making some pineapple twist. A little bit more complex, but nothing that you haven't seen before. And then since I was in here working by myself and I had access to an angle grinder and a vise, I decided that I would also go ahead and do some decorative twists that actually need power tools to make. Chisels just really don't work for the purposes of these twists. And those twists are square twist and dragon scale twist. This one didn't turn out quite as I had hoped, but I will be showing you guys how to make these as well. Square twist I really like because if you wanted to, you could go through and on all of these squares you could take a little center punch a couple dots in it, and it could look like maybe some dice or something like that. These are all really nice if you wanted to add a little bit of a decorative flair to a hook, or if you had a knife that had a full metal handle. This not only gives some good grip, but it makes it look really nice. Probably not something I would do for a knife I was actually wanting to use, because this would get pretty uncomfortable after a little while, probably get blisters, and this one would be a nightmare to hold on to, stabbing my hand. But anyway, let's get into it.
Okay, so I'm starting off with a piece of square stock. The size of the stock doesn't really matter as long as it is large enough that you can get all these fine details in there, but not so large that you have a hard time twisting it. We're going to be beginning with the braided rope twist, and as you guys saw in class, that starts off with 4 chiseled lines down the entire length of the piece. I didn't end up going down the entire length because, as you can see, there's a little bit of like scuzziness. I'm not exactly sure what caused it, but the steel towards the top had gotten marred by something, and so I decided to just use that as a location to hold onto the piece while twisting, and only twist the bottom about 2/3. So just like with that chiseled line, you're going to do that same thing on all 4 sides, and then for the braided rope twist, you're going to knock down these corners. You want to round the corners out just a little bit so that it looks more like rope as opposed to just a square twist with lines down the middle, because as we all know, rope is round. So I'm just going to knock those down. I probably could have knocked these down a little bit more. As you'll see in a second, it still ended up looking a little bit too sharp to actually be rope. But if you round it off too much, then the tongs, or the pliers and the vise are going to have a hard time gripping onto it while you're twisting. So here I'm just going to do a full twist. So that's 3 turns, and that's the braided rope twist. Next up, we're going to be doing pineapple twist, which starts off exactly the same, so I'm just going to skip the chiseling step. But the first twist is where this really departs from the braided rope. You'll notice here I'm going to do 3/4 twists, and that's very important for later on. The first twist you do has to be divisible by 3, so it can be 3/4 twist, 1.5 twists, but something divisible by 3, and you'll see why that's important in a second. After the first twist, you're going to go back and you're going to knock down the ridges to establish a square side again. And honestly, just leaving it like this is already a pretty cool looking twist, but it doesn't take very much more work to go from this step to outright pineapple twist, so there's not really a reason not to unless you were specifically going for this design. I'm not exactly sure what you would call this style of twist. Squashed braided rope, I guess, but you see it flying out of my tongs there briefly, but that's what it'll look like after you're done flattening it. It should look mostly square once again, and the chiseled lines at one end should line up with the chiseled lines at the other end pretty closely. And that's important because you are going to chisel in new straight lines that should meet top to bottom. Now you'll notice as I'm chiseling, I'm only expanding the line by about half the chisel length each time, and that's because I want to make sure that the chisel is well seated in line with the existing line that I've already chiseled in. So I'll sort of set it in there and then rock it back to make sure it's in the correct orientation. And that way you can get these straight lines that are very consistent without any real wobbliness. And like I said, they should meet top to bottom. And now here's why it being divisible by 3, the first twist, is important. Because whichever way you twisted it first, you are going to twist it 1/3 in the opposite direction. And that will reveal these diamond shapes that sort of look like the texture of a pineapple. And like I said, you can do this with any number of twists that's divisible by 3. So I did a 3/4 twist and untwisted it 1/4. You can do a 1/2 twist, 1 1/2 twist, and then untwist it by 1/2. But keep in mind, the larger number of twists you do, the smaller those diamonds will end up. So now we're moving on to the cubic twist, which some people call the dice twist. And since I am using the angle grinder anyway, I decided I might cheat a little bit and use it to put in the center lines instead of chiseling those. Just save a little bit of time and effort. Now, I'm not sure if in the class we're going to allow you guys to play around with the angle grinders at all. They are considered one of the more dangerous tools in any workshop, and so that might not be the best thing to do for some beginners. But basically, you're just going to make these center lines on each side, and then you're going to go in and on 2 of the sides, making sure that they are opposing sides, you are just going to grind in these cutoff points to make cubes. You're going to cut in with the angle grinder just until you meet those center lines on both sides of the faces that you are cutting into. And the reason that we do this with an angle grinder instead of a chisel is because the angle grinder will leave those the edges of those cubes nice and sharp and well defined, whereas a chisel will sort of round them out a little bit. Which isn't ideal. You could do it with a chisel, it's just not going to look as nice. And like I said, you're going to copy that on the opposing side, leaving the 2 sides on that are adjacent to it untouched. And then I don't know if the number of twists really matters, but I decided that it looked good after about 1 1/2 twists. And like I said in the intro, if you wanted to, you could have taken a center punch and put in a couple dots before twisting and made it look a little bit more like dice. Now moving on to the dragon tail twist, or dragon scale twist, which is going to start off the exact same as the cubic twist, except instead of cutting in at just a 90-degree angle to the bar, you're going to cut in at about a 45-degree angle so that you get these nice little scale-shaped triangles, or diamonds. And unlike the cubic twist, which only does this on 2 sides, you're going to copy that around the entire thing. And now here, the reason it didn't turn out quite like I had wanted is because I put in that tiny little cut at the very top, I had a hard time gripping onto that piece and making it rotate independently of the rest of it. So the top of it didn't really get twisted very well, but the middle part behaved very nicely, as you can see, and that is the characteristic look that hopefully the majority of your bar would take on. Alright, and with that, that pretty much wraps up this demo. I'm, again, not sure if we're going to be able to get you guys using the angle grinder, but just in case we do, now you know how to make some decorative twists.